This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 30 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Engaging Experts. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Scott Bennett to the show. Mr. Bennett is an expert witness in property management and premise liability with over 3 decades of experience. He's an accomplished writer, professional speaker, and serves on numerous property management boards. Mr. Bennett, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Noah. Glad to be part of the show.
Absolutely. Let's jump into it. So your background is in real estate, property management, things along those lines. But how did you first get into expert witnessing?
Great question. I hear a lot of experts say the same thing by accident, and I guess accidents do happen. So that's certainly the way I got into the expert witness field. So you said I've been in property management, risk management for the past 34 or 5 years. And I guess it was about 2017, I got a call from the expert for the Expert Institute out of New York. Actually sent me an email and said, hey, we have an attorney that would like to talk to you about assistance with one of his premise liability cases. And me not being the trustworthy individuals, thought maybe it was spam, didn't really take it serious. Anyway, they reached out again and got a call from their New York office. And I said, I don't know a lot about what you're asking. I'm not familiar with you. So they said, well, research us, get back with us if you're interested. So I did. Long story, called them back. They set me up a conference call with an attorney, I think out of Houston. And I had no idea what conversation was going to be. And he just said, I saw you on LinkedIn. I saw you have a lot of experience with property management, premise liability. I'm working a case on an injury in an apartment building in this particular case. And he said, I would just like for you to draft me a report, look at all the discovery. And I'm learning all the legal language as I go, of course. So
Sure.
it's, even though I've worked with attorneys in the past, it's until you're close to it, you don't understand the lingo. But so I guess I took my first case 2017, kind of maneuvered through all that. And, he said, what do you charge? What are your rates? And I actually had to research that. I didn't know what an expert witness should even charge,
Sure.
So I think
Why would
we
you?
all kind of fumbled that, in our early career. So yeah, I worked on that case for about a year. The rewards were very nice, and so that got my attention. And so it just kind of took off from there. So I started looking into it further, and then it seemed like after that, others were reaching out. Word of mouth, as travels, and that's kind of what happened.
Sure. As somebody who's been now doing this for quite a long time, tell me a little bit about how it has changed. So first time an attorney calls, you have no idea what you're supposed to be asking, how to vet whether or not this is an appropriate job for you. So compared to then, your very first phone calls, now tell me about how you take a phone call from an attorney. What are the things that you're looking for?
Oh my gosh. It's been an incredible learning experience. I mean, we're talking almost going on 10 years now. And I guess I learn something new every case, every conversation that I have with an attorney. As you well know, every attorney style is different. What they're asking you to do is different. So there's never a case identical or alike. So yeah, I mean, so I've learned as I've gone, and as I said, I learn each and every time. So yeah, typical, attorney reaches out, or I've done cases with Roundtable Group. Actually, just signed a contract with them yesterday. Great people to work with, yeah. But atypical, you get a phone call from an attorney, and usually, in my case, now that I've been doing this for 10 years, it's a referral. So I really don't do much advertising. I have a publication in the Seek directory. That's all I do. But most of my business now is just is referral type business. So attorney calls, he said, hey, here's the facts of my case. Here's kind of what I'm looking for, based on your background. So, I listen very closely. I want to know, of course, the parties involved. You got to do a conflict check
Of
initially.
course.
And then I want to know all the facts of the case, or, at least some detail as to, because I have to determine, can I really help this attorney on the case? Some experts tell me, yeah, we take everything that comes our way. Well, yeah, I don't do that. It's just, it can put me in a position that if I did that, either I'm not going to have time to do the due diligence and give you, as the attorney I'm working for, a good job and a good report. So I'm very selective now in the cases that I take. I just have to be, number one, if you get too overloaded, then you're going to miss something. And I don't want to take that risk. So my name's on that report.
How do you go about saying no?
I don't have problems saying no. It's, yeah, well, I mean, great example. I turned down two cases this week. One was a conflict, after I did the conflict check. The other one was, I just didn't think I was the right fit, with this attorney or the case. And so the beauty of that now is I have a network of other experts I work with. So I refer to them. So, I'm really not I'm telling the attorney I can't really take the case, or, I don't think I'm the best fit. However, I've got another network partner I think can really help you. So, they like that because I'm not giving them a flat no. I'm able to assist them by recommending someone else. They don't have to do that work. So they like that.
Sure, absolutely. I want to circle back to when you were talking about contracts. You had no idea how much you were even supposed to charge. These days, do you have any specific terms that you like to put into contracts, either a specific retainer, travel expenses? Do you customize contracts?
I do. And early on I wasn't doing that because I didn't know, you really needed to. But, as I've attended a lot of the training sessions with Seek and some other groups out there, you soon learn. You learn what you need to protect you as a business owner, which we're a business owner as a expert witness. So I have a formal contract retainer that I use now and have been using for the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And it's vetted by attorneys, so it's a very solid retainer agreement. And yeah, in that contract, of course, and typically attorneys will ask you to send them your fee schedule, which I have that outlined, pretty well formatted, and then my CV, of course, then the retainer agreement I send. And interestingly, you asked that about retainer agreements. Some attorneys won't sign retainer agreements, which
Right.
I, I I I guess I understand that. Maybe I don't. But they just say we prefer not to sign. We agree with your fee schedule. We'll pay your retainer, because I do ask for an upfront retainer, and agree to your fees. And I've never had a problem with not getting paid, but it's just more of a sense of security for me to have that retainer agreement signed in the file.
You had mentioned report writing. That's part and parcel to the job. It's something that every expert has to do. Tell me a little bit about your report writing methodology. Do you like to use lots of demonstratives? Do you use an index? How do you organize your reports?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it that way. Yeah, normally what I do, I'll take all the discovery documents and and I'll abstract them, meaning I'll take out all the meat of the discovery and all the documents, whether it's depositions, it's requests for information, the petition. I mean, there's so many, there's hundreds of documents we have to read, we have to review, and I don't want to not read a document, and then get tripped up at trial or in a deposition to say, well, did you not look at that document? So I have to be prepared to say I looked at every document the attorney sent me in this case. So that could be 100 documents, it could be 1,000. It just depends on the case. Um, so we abstract those documents. We we then take the abstract. So it's like putting a puzzle together. Let me kind of rephrase it that way. So after all the discovery's been read, reviewed, and then everything's in abstract and including the depositions, then I'll take that and start building my report. And
Oh,
so my methodology, I look at each case, entirely different because they all are different. And so, for example, I'll look at all my abstract documents, and then I'll just start building the report in terms of my experience and how and my experience related to the case. Why I think I can opine and write an expert report for opposing counsel to state my case, so to speak.
sure.
So here are the things I see that should have happened or didn't happen in this case, and certainly how can I help my attorney build his case, to make a stronger um, case based on his arguments.
Have you written rebuttal reports?
I have, yeah. I mean, because a lot of my cases, yeah, there's experts on the opposing side too, and
Sure.
they have their opinions, and I respect that. I'm not, I don't, I don't go down the path, and some experts unfortunately do. They will bash the other experts' credibility, and so, I've just made it a practice. I don't need to do that. I mean, we're all credible in what we do in our craft. But what I do, I will refute some of their opinions.
Sure.
Um, give you a great example. At a case months back, it was a fire. Someone was injured. Um, and the opposing counsel had two experts, and kind of was refuting some of the things I was saying. But at the end of the day, I kind of looked at their history, and neither of those experts had property management experience, number one. So they're just kind of looking from the outside in, if you will. Not that they're bad people and not that they're credible in what they do. It's just, in this particular case, they didn't quite understand the dynamics of how property management works. And so I just essentially rebutted their opinions because, with being in the property management industry for over three decades, I've seen a lot and probably understand a lot more than they did in this particular situation.
Speaking of impeaching credibility, let's talk a little bit about depositions and
Mhm.
cross-examination and things of that nature. Do you have a specific preparation method? How do you get ready for a big, potentially long and contentious deposition, for instance?
Well, you lose a night's sleep, number one, over it because you're thinking through the whole night. Okay, what do I need to say here? What do I need to say there? And again, it's like every deposition's different. It's the unknown. I'm assuming you've had depositions before, you know how it works, but um, you don't know what to expect. And so, can you plan for everything? Absolutely not. So, what I tend to do, and sometimes I over plan, but I go back and review the documents, certainly review my report because I want to make sure I understand everything, that's been pulled together in terms of my reporting. So, you go in with expectations. Opposing counsel is going to try to, shoot arrows at you every opportunity, and so
Hmm.
I just go in prepared for that. And I have my defense built already. A lot of counselors, attorneys, they want to try to destroy your credibility, number one. And
Sure.
so, I've built my business and I built my reputation in my experience to the degree that I mean it's pretty fail proof. I mean, everything I have on paper is what I've done. And so it's not fabricated by any means. So I never worry about the credibility part. It's just I just want to make sure that I haven't missed something in that discovery that the attorney can turn around and say, well, you didn't put this in your report because you didn't see it, things, like that. So it's a lot of those little unknowns that you just have to make sure you're prepared for.
Some areas of practice are fairly dynamic with changing rules and laws, and that in turn can allow you to change your opinion as the rules and laws and regulations and fact patterns change. Have you been in situations where an attorney has tried to impeach you on a prior inconsistent statement that may have reflected an earlier thinking or an earlier thing that you've written or said or done?
It's that's a great question, and let me say it this way, it rarely comes up. Um, a lot of times opposing attorneys they want to hold my feet to the fire on codes, for example, that I've quoted. So
Sure.
I'm Texas based. So in Texas, we have what's called the Texas Property Code, that I refer to a lot because it sets property standards, for um, any any related property, whether it's an apartment or commercial building or retail center or any of that. And so, I use that code book a lot and reference those codes. And attorneys a lot of times will try to twist that around. And I have to refer them back to those specific codes, because, to their credit, a lot of them don't fully know all the codes in that Texas property code. So I have to kind of steer them back to that specific code. And then I use a lot of industry publications. I use the global organization that a lot of us use is Institute of Real Estate Management. We call it IRM for short. And then there's the apartment associations. There's a National Apartment Association. There's retail organizations. And so, they all have industry publications. And so I stay updated on all of their recent publications and their memos and education literature that they put out. And so I reference a lot of that. And so what I run into, and I guess really to answer your question, is a lot of the attorneys, they don't quite understand that language sometimes, not to discredit them. It's just, that's not their world. That's my world. And so what we find is, when I reference those codes, they want to hold my feet to the fire and know exactly the page number, the publication, where I got that, because they want to go look it up. And so, so unfortunately, if you're not a member of those organizations, sometimes you can't access that. So then I have to prove, and show that, in a deposition or a trial where I took that language from that publication.
It sounds like to stay current, there's a lot of continuing research in terms of staying up to date on a variety of codes. And are there also a variety of organizations that you have to maintain membership in? What exactly does it mean to remain current in your field?
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I have to stay very active. Well, you don't have to, but I choose to, just to stay up to date on all the um, current language that we use. But definitely, I'm very involved in apartment associations. I'm very involved in the Institute of Real Estate Management. I'm a member of National Fire Protection Association, National Apartment Association. So there's a lot of industry organizations that I'm a member of, and then attend their conferences annually, attend quarterly meetings, and I sit on a couple of various boards with apartment associations, with Institute of Real Estate Management. So then I serve on a housing board also that I've been a member of for many, many years, and served as president of that organization. So, all of that, the downside of that, it takes a lot of extra time. But to craft what I do and be able to stay on what I call on top of my game and do a good job for an attorney, you have to stay connected to these organizations. Otherwise, you get out of the loop at some point. And if you miss a new publication, or back to what you said earlier, a new law or standard that's come up, I can't afford to miss that. So
Right.
you got to kind of stay in the know.
You work out of Texas. Have you worked in other venues? Have you had to deal with codes or rules in other states or even other countries or at different levels of government, perhaps? Tell me a little bit about working in different venues and how that affects you.
Yeah, initially when I started out, 10 years ago, it was primarily all Texas that I did. And then I think from what I gathered, as my name, got distributed and started getting referrals, Yeah, I started getting cases from other states. So I'll probably have worked in 25 different states, 20 states throughout the US. I got a call yesterday from Montana of all places. And I've never gotten a case out of Montana, which is kind of neat. I've done some California stuff, Florida, Chicago, a lot of East Coast, Southwest, Southeast. So it's just kind of neat. I mean, you know, the more geographical areas that I work in, then I learn that much more because, as you know, every state code is different, and
Right.
so that's the real challenge. Just like I was talking to the attorney yesterday. He said, "Well, Montana law is totally different." I'm like, I don't know anything about Montana law, but he's the lawyer. I'm not. So, really, all he was looking for me is, what we call in my industry standard of care. It was an accident that happened at one of those dude ranches, if you will, and he's just looking for a property management expert that can opine on standard of care and risk assessment, that kind of thing. So it's like I told him, regardless if it's an apartment building, a retail center, a commercial office building, or even a dude ranch, which may be my first, at the end of the day, it's all the same when it comes down to standard of care.
Moving into the more general, has the role of the expert witness changed throughout your career? Have there been any fundamental changes either through technology or the court system operating in some way differently? Has anything changed, and do you see it going anywhere? Are there any trends that you've noticed?
I mean, it's just like our whole world. It's always ever changing. And if you don't like change, then you're probably in the wrong field, especially the legal aspect of it. But when I first started out, and you'll certainly relate to this, we were doing all of our depositions live, more court appearances, and then of course COVID hit, and it seems since post COVID, all the depositions now are via Zoom, which I don't have a problem with. I mean, it's in person is a little more personal, but Zoom, everybody loves it now. I don't know that we'll ever go back to live depositions. I don't even think attorneys want to do that. And I'm seeing, now that the courts have been back open, even though caseloads are backlogged on judges' case list, the courts are back up running full, so we're seeing more trials being scheduled, more court hearings, those type things. But yeah, I think the big change in the legal industry, and I talk about this every day with legal experts and expert witnesses, is a little thing called AI. I don't know if you've heard of it yet, but it has busted wide open, and I think some law firms have introduced the AI software, and I'm just I haven't really used it to any degree. I mean, I'm aware of it and kind of know what it does, but
Sure.
honestly, I'm just unsure of it. So I know we were at a Seek conference in May in Florida, and what I like about those conferences, they bring in federal judges and district judges and attorneys and people that know the legalities, and they were talking about AI, and they said, you know, you, a judge, if a judge even suspects that you've used AI in an affidavit or any language you're using, he'll throw it out. And so that's kind of why I've kind of steered clear of it, because I'm sure there's a fine line in how I draft a report and how AI may look at something. But but what people have told me, and even attorneys, is that AI is only as good as what you double check is coming out of it. So that's my extent of what I know about AI. Yeah,
Yes, and it's such a developing field that's what's true today may completely change by this time tomorrow. Uh,
that's
do
right.
you do you have any stories, any tentpole cases that either change the way that you do something as an expert witness or reinforce something that you were already doing?
As I mentioned earlier, every case is different. And I take away many different things from each case that I do, each case that's, settled or whatever the case may be. But, I work so many different ends of the spectrum. I mean, I work anything from, shootings on properties, murders, assaults, injuries, mold cases are a big one. And unfortunately, I've had three new cases in the past month of child drownings. At one was an apartment building, two were in a subdivision community pool. Where they had an HOA, and one even had lifeguards and allowed a child to drown. So, it's just it's those cases really get to me, especially when there's a child involved. And one case that really stood out to me that I think was probably a big learning curve for me was it was a case in I think it was Minnesota somewhere where a train had two little children gotten away from their parents, ended up on the train tracks, and the train had hit both those children. And that was a tough one because I mean you go through that discovery and photos, and I think I took away from that how even though the parents are responsible for your children, an owner of a property has obligations to kind of put up safety barriers where a child can't just arbitrarily walk onto a train track. In this case, it was a fencing issue. So I think what I learned from that more than anything are what property owners and managers are really responsible for at the end of the day. And I was in trial last week. The attorney asked me, he said, can a property manager assess and know every possible risk on the property? Well, the answer is no. I mean, that's like looking into your crystal ball. But the big thing we run into with property managers, again, whether it's a retail center or apartment community or whatever the case may be, is if they're not doing the proper inspections, that's a big no-no because, you don't know what exists on your property and what safety issues you have unless you're constantly walking it and inspecting it. So we find that a lot. It does not happen. Therefore, that's why we see a lot of these injuries happen at these properties.
That dovetails well into my next question, which is, what do you find meaningful about being an expert witness? Why is this work important?
I'm glad you asked that. It's well, to me, I like a challenge. I love a challenge, and I love getting something, from taking it from the beginning, seeing it all the way through to an end result. Whether that's through a trial, whether that's through mediation, whether that's just through a settlement, by both parties before it even goes to mediation. And I want to be, I had an expert tell me years ago because when I first started this, I thought, it's all up to me to win the case. It's rest on my shoulders to win the case for the attorney. He said, that's not true. He said, it's really his job. He said, just think you're an integral part of it, because we may have 5 experts on one case. And so I'm 1/5 of that. So once I finally learned that, I can only do so much or contribute so much of my knowledge and my experience into the case. And then that took a little bit of burden off of me to say, okay, now let's have fun with this. Just number one, enjoy what you do. Take it serious, of course, and do the best you can in the form of a report. And, I'll write my reports just like you and I are sitting here talking. I'm going to educate the opposing counsel and my counsel in that report to say, here's what I think. And here's why.
What makes for a positive expert attorney relationship? How do you get off on the right foot to begin with? And how do you maintain that momentum throughout the case, no matter what happens?
And that's very important. Because really it's like a employee relationship is the way I look at it. So, the attorney's hiring me as his contract employee. But you can usually tell in the first 30 minutes of a conversation if you're going to enjoy working with this individual. So again, it's just like interviewing with a company. Some companies aren't the right fit for everybody. So if we get through that hurdle where I'm like, yeah, I kind of like this person, and like what he's saying or she's saying, and then we start talking about the case, and I've had experience with what they're talking about, or I feel like, yes, I can be an asset to this attorney and help him or her with this case. um, then we'll continue. But I've had many instances, well, not many, but several, where it just didn't feel like the right fit, and I just got that vibe from the attorney, that sometimes they're wanting you to do things in terms of a report that I'm just not comfortable with because it's not in my lane. So as we say, we want to stay in our lane.
Right.
So if I feel like I'm having to get out of my lane to do a report, write a report, I'm not going to do that, because remember, if I'm being deposed, I have to speak to what I've written. And if I'm not comfortable with it, it's going to be tough for me to defend.
Right. Absolutely. Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for experts or even for attorneys working with experts?
Again, it's just like we just talked about. I mean, it's a mutual respect. And, I think with any case you take or any attorney you work with, what I ask the attorney is, please make sure that I have every possible document you have. And, that's number one. And number two, don't, as an attorney, don't send me 1,000 documents to read 2 days before the deposition. I've had
Sure.
that happen where someone forgot to send me those depositions. And then I guess my worst pet peeve, with any case or any relationship, is if an attorney doesn't ever communicate to you that the case that's settled. I've had a few of those situations, where I've gone back in my file 3 months later and emailed the attorney to say, hey, I haven't heard anything. What's going on? And they will tell me, oh, that case settled 4 months ago, but you never told me. So in my world, it's still open. So it's called communication. And so that's, I think, the takeaway for me, and for any attorney I work with, is communication is the vital ingredient, from beginning to end, because and I get it. I respect, law firms. They have so many cases they're working, and I probably have 30, 35 active cases I'm working today. But I have to follow up on those to make sure I'm staying current. And I just, I ask the same of them, please always keep me in the loop on any changing circumstances.
Absolutely. Sage advice. Remain proactive. Mr. Bennett, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you so much, Noah. Appreciate it.
And thank you, as always, to our listeners for joining us for another edition of Engaging Experts. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Engaging Experts. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com.